Really, Element RC? Just when I figured out what I was going to build for a project vehicle on my Enduro, you came out with an IFS suspension kit. Now I have to go back to the drawing board, and I had to go back pretty quick because they sent one over to put on one of my vehicles, and I came up with this truck right here. This is my interpretation of a C10 pre-runner, but this video is all about the IFS suspension package you can now get from Element RC. And it all comes in this nice little box right here, and there's more surprises in the box that I got to show you guys, and just like all the other Element RC stuff. But let's talk about this kit. So it's an independent front suspension kit. Yes, no more solid axle up front. Here's my solid axle from my Enduro here. It is now independent front suspension, and that is just really cool. It just opens up the doors to so many different types of builds that you could do now. I mean, you know, we've been kind of limited to just solid axles front and rear. There's been a few custom mods out there, and now you could just get something that just bolts right on, and you know, you could go rock crawling with this. You could build a cool overland truck, and you could go build a pre-runner too if you want, you know. So there is just going to be a whole bunch of new builds, and it's going to be really exciting what this kit brings out as far as creativity and builders goes. So I already went ahead and built this kit up. Obviously I just had to dip right into it, and usually I show you guys part by part what was going on, but I thought this was so cool. I just dropped everything I was doing and just started building it. Let me just get this front bumper off so you guys can see a little bit more of what's going on. And here's the front assembly bolted on. This went together really, really easily. I think it was about 45 minutes or so, you know, kind of taking pictures and videos along the way, but they have really great instructions with this. So in this kit, you get this front assembly. You take off your front axle, you get the front skid plate, you get the upper plate, you get the gear case on the inside, you get the risers that go from the gear case to the chassis, and then the suspension arms, upper and lower, the tie rods, the steering rack, and the servo mount assembly, even the universal axles, all ball bearings. You get the ring gear with the spool and the bevel pinion, and of course all of the hardware to put it on. And you know, looking over this kit, they did a great job in putting this kit together. You know, just thinking about all the things that you're going to put this truck through. So, you know, number one, it still has some very good ground clearance to it. You know, of course, you know, it's got to be a little bit lower, you know, everything throughout, because it is now a suspension arm truck. But you still get some good clearance out of it. And they built it up with durability in mind. We've got a steel plate behind this bumper here to support the hinge pins. We've got some really bulky A-arms, you know, both on the bottom and on the top. The tie rods on here are 5mm thick tie rods. So again, bulk everywhere. Even the steering tie rod that goes out to the cranks is 5mm as well. And speaking of the cranks, the Ackerman bar on the cranks is aluminum as well. The steering cranks themselves, they are composite, but they're ball bearing supported. And it's a really bulky bell crank, so I think it's going to be stable there. We've got the metal ball studs for the steering links and everything. So, you know, they kind of went and built this up. It's not just a slapped together kit. You can see there was really a lot of thought and detail went in this. And what's really, really awesome, let me get back to the steering for a second here, is the steering throw on this. So you get a ton of steering throw to the point where when I had the stock tires on here, they mash up against the shocks. That's how much steering throw you get out of it. And the only thing I would suggest that you watch for is when you're building the steering links that go from the servo to the bell cranks, you know, just make sure you use the right ball studs in there. Speaking of the servo, they also go ahead and give you a metal servo arm in the kit. That's a great feature as well. But inside the gear case, metal gears and you know, ball bearings, like I said. The only thing that I'm going to ding these guys on with this kit was the ball bearings that are in here. They are not shielded for the gear case. Now, it's pretty much the same bearing that's on the inside of the case back here, inside the axle back here, which it's all protected. But that bearing sits on the outside of the case. So I think I really would have liked to have seen some sort of shield there, or a rubber dust shield, or you know, at the very least a metal shield. So we'll see how that works. For dirt to really get in there, the outdrive cup is going to have to slide out, and it is a floating drive cup in there. You know, kind of similar to the rear axle setup where the axle goes into the locker, but that outdrive is going to have to slide out in order for, I think, dirt to get in there. The universals on here, really nice steel universals. And they even go and give you the hexes on the outside. Again, all ball bearing supported. So it's a nice kit. Let me just flip it over here. It also has this lower skid. And it takes place of where the links went before. So there is a little bit of hardware that's reused, not too much. The big change, other than installing the front end on this, is you also have to swap the shock towers. So the rear shock towers go in the front shock towers go in the rear, and they alter positions. But it's all explained in the manual. It's really well laid out. Beyond swapping out the shock towers, they also give you new front springs in the kit. It's a firmer front spring than what's stock. And they also give you these little aluminum teardrops that basically drop the shock down to the proper position. And that really wraps up the kit. And that, you know, again, it opens up the doors to so many different builds that you could do with this truck now. You know, not that you couldn't before, but now I think builds are just going to get really wild, and I'm really excited to see what people are going to come up with. With that said, why don't I go throw a battery in this, throw the body back on, and go out for a little bit of off-road action. So before we talk about the performance of the IFS suspension kit, I bet you thought I forgot to tell you guys about the box. And you know Element RC always has something going on inside the box. And yeah, I kind of forgot to tell you about it before, but I'm going to show you now what this box has on the inside of it. And inside, they have these cool arcade games that you could cut out and tape together and add to your Element RC garage. I think that is pretty cool. It looks like we got a gatekeeper game, off-road game here. And if you go and start opening things up, you find some more stuff going on, like street signs. And there's even a stereo system. But if you look really close over here, you'll notice RC Driver Drive, and yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Thanks a lot for doing that, Element RC. Definitely like that, and there's a lot of other influencer street signs in there. You can go cut it out, add to your garage again, or wherever you want to go and put them up. Maybe add them to your trail that's in your backyard. That's pretty cool. I got to go cut those out and add them to my garage. All right, now let's talk about the performance of the truck. And as you can see, I've got my Sendero body back on it, and that's because I tested it both as that pre-runner style of truck where I was kind of just bombing around with it, and I also tested it in kind of crawler fashion with what I had available to me. But let's start off by talking about my C10 pre-runner that I built. That was a lot of fun. Kind of just going fast and going over bumps and ruts and through sand and stuff. I had a 3S battery pack in there. I did switch out to the Radon motor from Reedy, and I also have a Reedy high voltage servo in there. But other than that, the drivetrain remained stock. Stock pinion gear, stock overdrive in the front when I was just bombing it around. And I have to say, I was pretty impressed with how it handled. In a trail truck, a crawler truck, it's kind of got a small, narrow platform to it, basically, when you kind of go and compare it to other basher vehicles out there. Those are big, where this thing is small. And even with its small stance, it handled pretty well. And that C10 truck that I built had extra tires in the back, so it had all that weight and the weight of a large 3S battery in there, kind of making this thing lean, and it was still manageable to drive. The front suspension works really well. The springs on it are a little bit stiff, but with the weight that I had on the truck with the C10 setup, it actually handled pretty well. And I liked how it just kind of bombed around. I didn't actually roll it once. I got it up on two wheels a lot, but I was able to control it, and I really like how the suspension felt. I thought it was pretty good, and it just pulled the truck through everything that I was bombing through. And so yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people are going to build up different styles of project, and you know, that pre-runner style of build there was just something that was different, and it was actually very capable. The one thing I got to point out on this is the steering throw. The steering angle that you can get on here, it carves some very, very tight corners, and so much so that if you're on a high traction surface, you're definitely going to roll it over if you are going too quick. But when it's in crawler mode, which I think a lot of people are going to enjoy, you know, that extra steering can, you know, really help you navigate through a lot of obstacles. You know, after I was done running it around with the pre-runner body, I took it off and I actually had my Sendero body with me. I had the stock bumpers, which we all know they get hung up on, but basically I just wanted to go and try this thing out, kind of with a box stock body setup. I've got the stock wheels and tires, the General Grabber tires on here, and I went and crawled it through some rocks and stuff. It pulled itself up and through. You just have to watch your ground clearance, basically. You know, it's a bit lower with this plate hanging down below, but that's kind of like, you know, maybe like a 1.55 setup where it's lower to the ground. You have to be aware of the obstacles that you're going over, and again, if you do that, the capability of the suspension is there. I would just say with the lighter weight body on there, I was still getting some arm articulation, but I think I would have liked a little bit softer of a spring. And if you find that out as well, Element RC has a number of different spring offerings that you could go and pick up and try and see what works best for you. The other thing I did want to point out is when I went and put this bumper on, this was a completely stock bumper, and I slid it all the way in to get some better clearance out of it because it's a big bulky bumper. It actually, the posts on the backside locked out the steering, and I didn't see that, so I went out to drive it, and I wasn't getting any steering throw. So if you if you're putting a bumper on, an aftermarket bumper on here, the stock bumper, you're pushing it all the way back in, you might have to trim the post. Just be aware of that. So if you put something on there, just check your steering. But other than that, this is a great kit. It did really well. All the parts are still slot free on here. The front skid is pretty beat up. Again, just be aware of what's in front of you so you don't mangle this thing. It does take some hard hits, And now I know why they've got that steel plate basically behind protecting the lower bulkhead. I think it just kind of acts as a brace for when you're hitting stuff as well. But this is a very cool kit. And as I kind of mentioned early on, I think Element really threw us for a loop here. We were all just going crazy, building up solid axle trucks, and now we have to figure out what crazy build we're going to do next off of this. I think a lot of people are going to pick up this IFS suspension kit. It's a great option to add to the Enduro, and I think it's just going to help you enjoy your truck even more. Wait, before you go, there's two more things I wanted to point out. Element RC does give you servo mounts, so you can mount a servo winch to the top plate, and if you already have aftermarket steering blocks, they are compatible with this kit.